No one's perfect, even if we secretly believe they are. So if you've been struggling and failing to keep it all together, you're in good company. Women today are pushing harder than ever to do it all and break through their personal limits. But what if we're pushing in the wrong direction? Join a growing movement of women exploring their boundaries as opportunities. Be empowered by their experiences to create a best life that reflects your expectations and no one else's. If you're ready for a different kind of podcast, then you've arrived. Welcome to Women of Valor. If you're one of those people that listen to an episode immediately after it's released, then you would know that last episode with Sari Singer, I had a little bit of an oops. And I actually put this week's episode after the introduction with Sari. But have no fear. If you listen to that, go back to the episode with Sari Singer. We have rectified the situation. And if you have not yet listened to this week's episode before everything was fixed, then you're in for a real treat. I've been keeping my eye on Shira Lankin-Sheps for a while. And I didn't quite understand all of the work that needed to be put in to create the Layers project when it was a blog and then a magazine and now a book. Sharing someone else's story without, hearing their voice and all that jazz is a tough gig. I mean, I don't think we quite tell the whole story on this podcast. And I think that the Women of Valor podcast is almost, if I may say, an elementary version of what the Layers project is. Shira has developed an incredible process and product, from the blog to the magazine to now a hard copy book. And we will be attaching a link to that book in the show notes. One of my biggest takeaways from this episode is just the fact that all of us are so multifaceted, and when someone tells their story, it's not limited to one experience or one pivotal moment or one personality trait, because we are so complex. We are so different. We have so many layers. Hi, Shira. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and one thing that you love about yourself.
Hi, Barry. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Shira. I am the founder and publisher of the Layers Project magazine and the author of my brand new book, Layers. I live in Israel with my family, and something that I love about myself, I really care about people a lot.
Yeah, you can tell that. You can definitely tell that from the Layers project and from the Layers book. And you can't see, thank God, but when you're listening to this podcast, thank God for my sake. But when I'm seeing Shira, in her background are some of the images that she has taken of women that she's featured in the Layers project. And I would like for you to explain what the Layers project is, but from what I have seen and from what I have read, essentially the Layers project is like the OG, the pioneer of women sharing their stories and normalizing struggle. I thought it was such wow, what an amazing idea to start a podcast to share women's struggles. I was literally reinventing the wheel on a different platform, which is great because you know what? Let's have it on all the platforms. But Shira, can you tell us about the Layers project, how it started, what it is, and so on and so forth?
Got it. So the Layers project has been around for about 4.5 years. Back then, when I started it, social media was a very different landscape. It was, if you recall, it was like a highlight reel of everybody's perfect lives. There were no stories. There was no messy posts. Everybody just posted their perfectly filtered highlights of their day. And we still have a lot of that. but today we also have a lot of people sharing and talking about their struggles and talking about their resilience. And I think people are genuinely much more authentic online today than they were back then. The reason why I started it was because it's so embarrassing to admit, but I really genuinely thought that everybody's life was far more perfect than mine. And as somebody who's like a perfectionist and goodist, and I wanted to be good, and I wanted to be the perfect wife and mom and professional, and I wanted to like make everything from scratch. Like I was the kind of person, if you were coming to my house for Shabbos, you'd be like, what can I bring? I'd be like, just yourself. Like, I got this, you
Oh
know?
yeah, no. I'm literally like, what well, what do you have? What can I bring?
Yeah.
Well, what can you bring? Would you like
Yeah.
to bring the full meal? Sure.
Yeah. So the secret was that during all that time, I actually was really sick with chronic illness and chronic pain, and which I know Barry, you know a lot about. And it
Hmm.
was awful, awful. And I was really like ashamed of not being the best version, or at least the expected version of myself that I had for myself and what I thought that other people had for me. And I felt really othered. I felt outside the community. I felt like there was no space for me to talk about it. Like I wasn't that sick that you had to like say Tehillim for me. Nobody was showing up bringing like casseroles to my door, you know? And so it was something that I just kept really quiet, and very secretive, and it was awful. And then one day in 2015, I wrote a blog post, and I kind of was like, hey, my corner of the world, guess what? I have chronic illness and it really sucks. And I tried to make some meaning of it. You know, I said, I've changed a lot from illness. You know, it's made me gentler. It's made me more empathic. It's made me more patient. And I'm better for that. But I also don't know if I'll ever get better. And this is not the life that I want to be living. And I remember how painful it was for me to write and how painful it was to post. But I was just so sick of the shame, you know, it was like choking me. So I hit post, and it was like ding, 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 ding. Like all these messages and all these comments started flooding in from people that I knew, people that I didn't know. It kind of got around because it was like, oh my God, did you see that girl was telling the truth on the internet? Like she was talking.
What?
Yeah, it was like a thing back then. Like nobody was doing that. And and then people just started messaging me like, hey, I have what you have. It's really hard. Or, hey, I'm going through a divorce. Or, hey, I was just diagnosed with cancer. And then I would go to the supermarket or to the swimming pool. I'd take my kids to the swimming pool, and people would pull me over and they'd be like, surely, you know, because I feel like you would understand, I have an eating disorder. I, I struggle with anxiety. I have this, I have that. And it became like an everyday part of my life.
People are like,
And
hey, how are you? I have this problem.
that's exactly what would happen. And so I became
Wow.
this address for people to turn to. Now, luckily, right before I got sick, I graduated from social work school. So I actually am a trained clinical therapist, which really helped because in my everyday interactions at that point, I really needed those skills. But
Those
basically,
boundaries, I can't even imagine having everyone. I'm saying I have it to like a small degree, being on a platform where,
yeah,
I share my things and then people have a direct way to contact me. And
right.
sometimes it's just like literally I go like, thank God I'm not like a social worker or a therapist because
Yeah.
like I would not be able to handle this. But having those tools, I think probably was easier. I mean, you share in the book how holding on to these stories is like it's a lot
Mm,
physically, emotionally,
yeah.
mentally. But I think it's not because someone shared like a, oh, this is happening to me. But it was something way grander than that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. I
Yeah.
interrupted you. So everyone's telling you their things. They're saying,
Yeah.
hi, my name is so and so, and I have this.
Yeah. When I started to get a little bit better, not a whole lot better, Barry, really not. Like dragging myself out of bed to stand for an hour to prove to myself that I could, I started a photography business. I just wanted to capture beautiful
Obviously.
moments. I just wanted to like experience life and be in moments of living when I had missed out on so much for so long. Um, but I didn't feel like I was like there at that thing that I should be doing. And so one day I like it was like Facebook. I like posted on my status and I was like, hey, everybody, like I'm thinking about doing this photo project for Jewish women where I photograph them and we talk about the challenges and triumphs of their lives, talking about stigmatized issues and taboo stuff, really getting to the heart of it, fleshing out Jewish women as three-dimensional characters, really telling our sides of the story. Does anybody want to do this with me? And within the first hour, I got 20 messages on Facebook.
Wow.
And
On Facebook.
I was like, huh.
You mean
And
it wasn't
so,
like nasty comments or anything? Because like
no,
I
no,
literally have a
Khalina.
major fear of Facebook because of the public hostility. But
Oh,
whatever.
really? That's how I feel
I'm
about
glad.
Instagram. That's so funny.
Oh yeah, we all
Yeah,
have our things. It's all bad.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway, basically, so then I turned around and then I launched the Layers Project, which is in its initial iteration was a blog, a photojournalism blog where I sat down with women and I interviewed them and I told their story in parts, like over 6 or 7 parts. So it became pretty engaging and people got really connected and really invested in these women and they kept refreshing their pages to get to the next part of the story. And then 1 year later, towards the end of 2017, we launched a full online magazine for Jewish women, publishing essays and profiles. The stories are told by me, essays are written by the women, and then eventually we added anonymous essays. And now we've just launched a book in collaboration with Koren Publishers Jerusalem, specifically the imprint of Toby Press. And it's 34 stories of Jewish women living in Israel. 31 of them are brand new. And it's been an unbelievable ride.
I mean, I have the book, and I started reading it. I got it, I want to say like on a Thursday night. And my husband's like, "What's this Toby Press thing?" I'm like, I know, give it to me, give it to me. And I like ripped it open and I was like, "This is my Shabbos reading. I need this." But I have to share with you, even just reading your introduction,
Yeah.
which you shared a little bit about just now. Um, you also mentioned, I don't know if it was you or it was Rachel, because Rachel Herkman is the
Mm-hmm.
clinical
Rachel
director.
Herkman is the clinical director of the Layers Project, and she has been for 4 years, which is pretty amazing. I get to work with her every single day for 4 years, and we are quite a duo. But she also clinically edited the book and wrote the forward.
Right. So I'm not sure if it was her or you that wrote, if there's a part or if there's a story that, you know, makes you react in a way that's not comfortable. I think I don't want to say the word trigger because I don't know. But makes you feel a certain way or has your body reacting a certain way, that's okay. And like you don't have to push yourself to, you know, continue reading that one. There's so many different stories. Some might be too close for home, some might,
Yeah.
but some people who are in that situation like need to hear that. So when I was reading your introduction about,
Oh,
creating this baby of
yeah.
layers and your chronic illness, I started shaking
Oh, I'm sorry.
because no, it was because it spoke to me so deeply
Yeah.
because of the similarities that we've experienced. I guess not long after that, I thought that the Layers Project was around for much longer.
Mm.
I thought it was like 7 years old at least. But I started my social media 4 years ago, but only like nearly a year in was I just like, I quit. Like I'm not managing, and this picture's just fake, and I'm not handling my life right now. And that got, a real response. But I see you as a pioneer in not only, advocating for people to speak about their struggles openly, but you're a facilitator. I think you're like one of the original facilitators to, for those who don't necessarily have a platform to speak about
Yeah.
such things that can
Well,
help.
that was kind of the point. When I thought about it, I said, well, not everybody's going to start a blog, but maybe I can start something and then facilitate that storytelling.
Yeah. One of the other things you mentioned in the book is that, you know, the pictures that you take, the women are looking directly at the lens.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I love it so much.
Yeah, I think it's super important. You'll find that about, I don't know, like 98% of the photos on the Layers project that include a face, and that's most of them, because that's kind of the point, right? They take them away. We plaster the internet with faces, beautiful faces of Jewish women. Um, I think that there's this really powerful biochemical thing that happens when you look somebody in the eyes. And when you have the opportunity to look someone in the eyes, it's a chemistry, there's a connection. And so, actually, I was just talking to somebody a few minutes ago, and before I spoke to you, and she said, I'm really loving the book. I said, that's so great. And I said, tell me your experience. And she said, I feel so invested in them. And I'm like surprised at the end of every chapter how invested I am in these women. And I said, well, it's this dynamic, this dynamic right. of like, you really, when you read these stories, whether they're on the online format or in the book, you literally feel like you're sitting Shabbos morning with your cup of coffee, and this person is sitting next to you and talking to you and telling you what happened to them. And one of my favorite pieces of feedback from this whole thing was somebody said to me, I felt like when I finished reading these stories, each one of these women, I wanted to tell my story to them because I felt like they would understand.
I love that.
Which is like incredible that basically we're creating relationships in absentia. Like the photos are so engaging, not because I'm like, I did such a good job with the photos, just because you're looking somebody in the face. They're just looking right at you, and they're telling you their story with such open honesty and authenticity and resilience and vulnerability and a lot of love. And it translates off the page. So
I think that when you see their face, when you see their face, it's not just reading a story, you're meeting a person.
Yep.
And I think that's something
it's a big commentary. Yeah.
Something that's
a big
lacking
commentary?
in a lot of spaces, because someone can write something. It's like, oh, but did it really happen? And like, who is this person? They're probably someone like this, or they're probably someone like this. And it's like, I'm looking at you dead in the face, and I'm sharing something very deep and personal with you.
Yeah, listen, it's you and I know
game changer.
On social media, let's say I write a nice essay, really personal essay, really, really intensely personal essay, okay? And I post that essay with a picture of a hand, or I post that picture with a picture of my face. Which one do we know is going to get 10 times the amount of engagement?
Obviously the face.
Yeah, because we respond to faces. We respond to people. So I think that it's a serious commentary on the importance of women's photographs, because there's something so humanizing about it. And when we take it away, we're taking a part of that away. And that's really chabal. That's too bad.
Yeah. And I think it's super like incredible to read some of these stories. Some of these women I know, most of these women I do not. But to read some of the stories of people that I love dearly, and see sides of them that I wasn't privy to before is super incredible. And
it's also painful. It can be painful. Yeah. I think that a lot of people have, especially in the beginning, when the women that I was working with were really local to me. And the response was very local to me because it's like my community, my county, my state, whatever. People were seeing other women that they knew, that they went to shul with, that they did carpool with, and they were learning entire stories, entire experiences that they had no clue that person was suffering from or with or wrestling with. And it was shocking. That's actually, I think, part of what happened, why Layers exploded in the beginning, is because people were so shocked to see that people that they knew, they liked, that they hung out with, had this whole inner life of struggle and resilience and growth that they had no idea about. And so it was actually very paradigm altering. People really started looking at each other differently, really differently. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating paradigm, but it can also be painful, because there's somebody that you love and there's, this like really deeply personal, painful thing that you're discovering. It can also be sad.
But I do think that you providing a space for them to share rather than them having to take the initiative and share it and have it all be on them and
Right.
have to like have on theirs seeing, when a blog post gets a little ding, 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 like you said,
Yeah.
you're enabling people to share with a bit more comfort
Mm-hmm.
and a lot less pressure. And I wouldn't say I think it's a little bit less direct. You're sharing something so personal, but it doesn't necessarily have to completely come back to you initially. And I think that that's like a huge service that
There's
you're
another
providing these
part.
women.
There's another part to it, which is that you've got backup. You got clinical backup because Rachel and I are both clinicians. And so we sit down and really analyze with the person every single word that we're planning on sharing in the book, on the online format. It happens the same every time. And we decide together, you like sit down with a team of clinicians and say, okay, what's going to be healthy for me? What's going to be safe for me? How is it
Wow.
this going to make me feel? And we play out all the scenarios. So by the time you get to the point where you're sharing, you're so comfortable because you've got the confidence that this is the right thing for me. And if it's not the right thing for you, we don't go through with it. There's been times where I've done profiles. I think I probably did about 42 interviews for the book and only 34 made it in. Not everybody's ready. Not every format is right for somebody.
Right.
Um, so you really have the opportunity to say, okay, I got this big thing that I want to share. I'm not going to be only responsible for making the choices about what's going to be healthy for me and healthy for the people who are reading. And so that I think is really like we're containing it for you. And that I think is a huge benefit.
I think the fact, and you also shared that in the book, that there were people who were supposed to be, featured in the book and then decided that they weren't comfortable. And you were
Yeah.
just like, okay, speaks volumes because I think there are people who find this sort of content intoxicating.
Mm.
And it's like, we need this. Like, what do you mean you're going to leave? You can't do that. Like, we spent so much time on this, and this is such intense information that like needs to be shared and it's going to provide so much value and views and shares, and we know this
Yeah.
is a topic, like how could you just like leave us hanging?
It's so funny because Rachel and I always say that if we were interested, if we followed that model where we just went after like the most titillating story, the most scandalous story, we would have millions of followers. But that's not the goal. The goal is healing for the person sharing and healing for the reader. If for 1 second, for one iota, this experience is not going to be healing for the person sharing, done. Drop it and walk away. And I've done it many times with no regrets, no stress about it. I don't get upset. I don't get frustrated, um, because it has to be right. Because if it's not right, then I'm not doing my job. Then I'm just using somebody, and I'm not here to use people. I'm here to facilitate their healing and their transformation and the communal transformation. I'm not here to hurt people. That's the opposite of what we do or what we're seeking to do. So yeah, I feel real strongly about that. That's for sure.
No, it's refreshing because there are people who share things with ulterior motives.
Yep.
We all know it. It can be beneficial to the person reading. It's obviously beneficial to the person producing it. But
Yeah.
to know that this is coming from a good, wholesome place and not from like a self-serving place is
Yeah.
something that's really important, for the listeners to hear and for the readers of your introductions. I did read those, you know, explanations, and it's it's very important, and I'm glad that, you know, I forget that you're also a clinician. You know, I think of you as like Shira's the writer, the photographer. Like I read in the book, I'm like, oh, really? Like, why are you doing this then? Like that's literally like where my brain went. I'm like, oh yeah, so she has Rachel on because she needs someone, you know, with a degree, with a background in psychology and things. It's like, oh, but you know, Shira has that too.
So I'll tell you why this is what I say, everybody needs a Rachel. And what I mean by that is when you do this work, this kind of like communal change, social writing for social justice or social advocacy, um, you need a sounding board. Like I have really good clinical judgment. Rachel has excellent clinical judgment. Rachel sees things that I don't see, and sometimes I see things that she doesn't see. And when you're responsible for conveying messages that people really are invested in, you need a sounding board. You need a backup because sometimes you're going to mess up or sometimes you're not going to be sure. Is this really the right word that I should use? Like when Rachel and I write together, which is very often, we go over every single word to make sure that what we don't have any, what she calls barriers to empathy, any cracks where people are going to say, oh, no, that's not true. Or, oh, no, that's not right. Or, you know, we have to be super, super careful because we're talking about mental health. We're talking about emotional health. We're talking about physical health. And people can project a lot of stuff on our content, a lot. And so we have to make sure that it stays in I statements. We have to make sure that we're not opting into generalizations. We got to be really careful because we're responsible. And when we've slipped up, because we're human, we've gotten thrashed. So we've definitely learned our lesson that our partnership is extremely important to the process. And I always tell anybody who's doing this work, I was like, get yourself a Rachel. Everybody needs a Rachel.
I literally need a Rachel.
Get a Rachel.
I shared something that was an idea from another person, in another person's words, in another thing, and yet I was bombarded with, but that's not the right word. I'm like, why are you coming to me? It's not. I didn't even write it. What are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
And like I've been so emotionally exhausted with, you know, everything that's been going on in the world. And like it's frightening to even share anything.
I know.
At this point, because if you do, you will have people come after you. If you don't, you will have people come after you. If you do it the wrong way, you'll have people come after you. If you do
it happens every time, anytime there's any kind of upheaval. It's a really unique challenge of social media today that you have to strike the just right balance. And I think that, because I think about this a lot, people are like, why do people care what we say about this, about stuff? Right. Events happen. It's because people are looking to people. First off, people become very invested in the people that they follow or the pages that they follow. They become really invested. And secondly, they are looking for comfort. They're looking for answers. They're looking for guidance. And if the people that you're following every single day are giving you guidance and what you wear or how you eat or how you think or how you should feel, they're going to be looking to you also in times of crisis. And so it's really complicated and it's very, very heavy to be responsible, especially if you don't feel equipped for that, you know?
Yes.
Like, because we're clinicians, I feel so we are right equipped. Now. Yeah, we are equipped. We know how to talk about scary things, but most people aren't. They're just not. And a lot of clinicians also don't even do it well. Some do, some don't. You know, we're just humans. We're people. But if you don't feel equipped, you're like, I didn't come on here to be the receptacle for everybody's anxiety and trauma and somehow like lead them out of it. Like, that's not what I signed up for. I came on here to, you know,
share whatever I want.
Yeah, talk about the things that I'm interested in.
You're speaking to my soul right now. It's extremely challenging. And it's just the fact that you have a system in place, because you're not only sharing your stories, you're taking on the responsibility to share someone else's story. And that's a lot.
It's really hard. It's really hard. And sometimes I'm like, why do I do this? Why do I tell other people's stories? And the reason why, as I always end up remembering, is because I just really love people. And the work itself is like the stuff that like gives me life. It's like some of the deepest joys that I've ever known in my life is talking to somebody and listening to them make meaning and connect with them. And honestly, the friendships that I've made through this work, and I've interviewed a lot of people, hundreds of people at this point. There are some people that I've connected with that are like lifelong friendships. Like you form a bond. Once you go through this process with me, we're like pretty cemented together, like it's a trust. You have trust in each other. There's a connection. You're working for a greater cause. It's really transformative and beautiful and difficult. But sometimes, yeah, when you're telling other people's stories, you're also responsible to tell the story in their voice. I never want to be someone, like the whole purpose is to give people their narrative, to give them control. If I, even for 1 second, make them feel like they're being pushed in a direction they don't want to go, or saying something they don't want to say, then I've not done my job. So ultimately on Layers, the final, every word, every sentence, every paragraph, every photograph is approved and has to feel resonant with the person who is being featured before it ever goes up. And also Rachel and I don't post without each other. We every post we post together.
That's amazing. I mean, it's very cool to hear the behind the scenes about how methodical this is, just purely for the sake of everyone else. Yeah. Not in like a self-serving way, but purely to help every other person who's going to read it and to do the story of the person featured justice. I read a little bit, in the book about your process of interviewing these women and, having these stories come to fruition. Would you mind sharing a little bit of that process on here?
Yeah, it's so intense. First off, I never asked somebody to do a profile ever, because I don't think it's possible that you can ask somebody to be so vulnerable. Like, can you tell your deepest pain to thousands of people in a book or online? Would that be okay for you? Like, how can you ask somebody of that? Like, how can you do that?
It's definitely different than being like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast about something you feel comfortable and passionate about? It's very
different.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. So usually people come to me. People will come to me and they'll say, there's something I want to talk about, or I'll announce, this month is May is mental health. I want to talk about mental health this month. And then people will reach out and say, I have a story that I want to share, about an essay that I want to write. With the profile specifically, it's an interesting process. Basically, I connect with whomever I'm meeting and we talk about a little bit, in the beginning, kind of like an intake. It's like doing an intake.
Yeah.
Tell me what your experience is in short form. Tell me what your story is. And so we kind of see if it's a good fit. I ask them, why do you want to share your story now? And, in the beginning, a lot of people were like, oh, because the photos are so gorgeous, or because like, it's just like, it would be good for my social media, and that's the wrong answer.
I can't believe they honestly answered that.
Well, yeah, it was in the beginning. And that's the wrong answer. Like, the correct answer for me is, I want to help people. I want to be an advocate for my cause. And that's a really important distinction. Another thing that's really important is like, what is this person's deal? Like, how whole do they feel about this issue? It doesn't have to be something that's resolved, because a lot of stuff doesn't ever resolve. But have you made meaning of it? Have you processed it? Have you processed it with a therapist? Do you feel whole? Sometimes things will happen like 2 weeks earlier, and they'll be like, oh, like this horrible thing happened to me. I want to talk about it on Layers. And Rachel and I will look at each other and we'll be like, too soon.
Yeah, you can't do
You're
that.
Not ready. No, but people do. Why? Because it's topical, it's timely, and it's gonna like get a rise out of people. But that's not the responsible way, in my opinion, of doing media. Obviously there's news, but Layers isn't news. We're not a news organization. We are a storytelling organization. We are a mental health or, advocacy, physical health advocacy, emotional health advocacy. We're talking about feelings. We talk about feelings. That's what we do.
No, I know that from my own personal experience. Like if I like tried to share something too early,
yes. Oh, I've
if I
seen you do
got a
that.
reaction that was like I found vile, or like,
Yeah.
someone trying to criticize me, I'm like, I'm going through something. Like, how could you? Like, no, the responsibility was on me. Like, I shouldn't have shared that at this time. Like, when I share things, I need to make sure that I have enough resources and like
Yeah.
tools in my toolbox to be
Yep.
able to not react, like not go into a downward spiral if someone
Yeah.
goes and like it's like, but I'm going through it right now, then I shouldn't be sharing that right now.
Yeah. I've seen you take a step back. I've seen you be like, you know what? I'm gonna step away right now. I'm going through something. It's not the right time to share it. And I always applaud you because it's super, super healthy. Meaning we got to know ourselves. And unfortunately, I can't control and you can't control the responses of the internet. And so the person has to be really whole, even if they're in pain. And I think that beauty and wholeness and pain can be woven through life. They're not mutually exclusive, but you do have to be on solid ground, 2 feet on solid ground with a good support system to do this. That's a really important distinction. And then we do the interview. So either it'll be on the phone and it's recorded, or on Zoom and recorded, or in person. And then we do the photo shoot, which is really fun and very collaborative. I show the photos as we go and they say, oh, I like this. I don't like this. I prefer it like this. And we keep going. And then I transcribe the interview. I shape it for chronology or narrative thread, or just, tell it, form it into a story. And then we work together to edit it a lot. We go back and forth and back and forth. It's a very long process. But in the end, we have something that's truly extraordinary, really extraordinary, and very transformative for them. Every single time that I give someone the opportunity to reclaim their personal narrative in the public arena, it's like a high, because it's so transformative for the people who are sharing.
How long does that process usually take?
So it depends. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 6 months. It depends on what it's for. If the book took a long time, because I did 34 of them, or really it was 42, but I just kept meeting people. So it was a process of about, the writing process was a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the editing was about 6 to 8 months. And it's a big fat book. It's like almost 500 pages.
Yeah, it's pretty big. I was surprised by how big it was.
Well, I'm very wordy, so.
No, I'm not saying it in a bad way. And I was like, oh, hello, Hefty. Yeah. Like, you will not be coming on the airplane with me in my purse. No, you will stay home. No. Yeah. I started reading through the stories that these women share, and I'm in awe. And I mean, I'm also very appreciative that you also write that you didn't sort them into categories. Because you could be like, oh, keyword infertility, keyword assault, keyword, childhood trauma, keyword mental health. And like you shared that you didn't do that because not everything, what can you explain?
Yeah,
I can't explain it as well.
On the magazine, what I used to do, I would do series of 3. I don't really do it so much anymore, but I used to do series of 3. So I'd say, this is the infertility series, and I'd tell 3 stories that are connected to infertility, or mental health or body image. I did a body image series when I first launched, and it was 3 different people with their different varying experiences. And it worked really well. But in the book, I was like, oh yeah, when I started, I was like, okay, so I'll have like mental health, check, and then I'll have like cancer, check, and then I'll just do the same. But then I met with these women, and I think that I was different this time, because it was the same work. It's the same, like everybody is just as extraordinary and just as fascinating and just as multifaceted. But I think I changed, And I would meet with them and I'd be like, okay, I literally sat down with one woman and I said, she said, because I was looking for a cancer story.
Right.
So she said, yeah, I had cancer. And I sat down and I said, okay, where does your story start? Which is the first question I always ask. So where does your story begin? Once upon a time. And she said, well, it started 20 years ago. And I was like, oh, it did? She's like, yeah, because it started with my bulimia. And I was like, wait, what? And then it became a whole story about body image and bulimia and cancer. And it was just so and pregnancy loss. It was just, there were so many levels to it. And I was like, whoa, like, if you try to slap a label on this right now, Shira, you're going to be reductionist. That's not what this story is about. This story is not about an issue. It's about a person. It's about a soul. It's about a life. And that was kind of a transformative thought for me. And so I think that what was great about it is because on the magazine, there's kind of like an element of surprise. Or suspense, at least, where you see the first part of the story, the second part of the story.
It's like a telenovela, like each thing. It's like, okay, and stay tuned for the next part.
Exactly.
I've done that on my social media too.
Week.
Yeah, I've done that on my thing, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, I can't wait! Post it today."
No, it's a very compelling form of storytelling. But I didn't want to lose that mechanism in the book. And so I realized that instead of categorizing people or trying to organize it in some sort of fashion, just tell stories about humans. And also it retains the element of suspense, because when you crack open that book and you turn to the next page, you have no idea what that story is about. You see her face, you see a title, but you have no idea what it's about.
The title isn't like my struggle with blah blah. Like that's not even remotely the type of title. So I don't know. You can't be like flip to find a story about this. Like, let me just find the things that I'm in the mood for.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, because I think a lot about this on the magazine too, about the issue of trigger warnings.
Right.
Personally, I think that trigger warnings can be important, but I also believe that trigger warnings further stigmatize issues. I think the word trigger warning stigmatizes the issue. I think that it's appropriate to let people know what they're engaging with before they engage with it. But that doesn't mean you have to be like, trigger warning, because I think that it further stigmatizes. Then it's like, this is going to be something that's going to be scary for me. We talk about sexual assault. Trigger warning, it's really important to let people know what's going to be there, because some people will get triggered. Right. But if you say trigger warning, you're saying you're going to be afraid of this.
Right.
So watch out, which I don't think is particularly helpful. So this is what I decided to do. In the back of the book, there's an index. And so if there's content that you're specifically looking to avoid, or content that you're specifically looking to engage with, it's listed in the back, and it's not listed by name. It's listed by page number, because I didn't want it to be like pregnancy loss, this one, and this one.
Right.
So reductionist. That's so ridiculous. It's you're just slapping a label onto somebody.
Not a recipe book.
No. So I include page numbers. This story. So let's say I want to avoid stories of cancer. That's something that's particularly triggering to me. It's something that I experienced, God forbid, or someone in my family. It's something really painful for me. I don't want to read those stories. So you can flip to the back of the book, and it will tell you what pages, what chapters have mentions of cancer in them. And that way I know, okay, I'll avoid those chapters because that's not healthy or safe for me. Or let's say, God forbid, you have cancer and you want to read about how people experience cancer and survive cancer, or the meaning they've made from their experiences. And so I go to the back and the same section, and then I can specifically look for those chapters. So I thought it was a really good compromise, because it keeps people feeling safe. They can feel safe in this book, and they also can choose to engage with what's good for them and opt out of what doesn't feel safe, I think.
I didn't even notice that. I didn't even check in the back. But I like the fact that you give that opportunity, and I hope that women are able to use that as like where to, avoid if it's too hard for them, or where to look if they're currently going through a situation, but not just like, oh, I just want to hear stories about this. Like, I think it's beautiful to hear all different types of stories in order to bring humanity to so many topics that have been just so, I don't know, made like rigid and black and white and like yes or no or any of those types of things, because you take away the humanity from the struggle.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think, we're
it
trying to put
removes
it
some
back in.
stigma because you're like, oh, hey, you know, this is a real person. This isn't like a hypothetical situation or just like a simple diagnosis from a textbook or, you know, some rumor you heard about someone or something. This is like real people.
They're very real and they're very human. And this is a huge thing that they did. And it's been like the biggest honor of my life to, besides for raising my children, to put this out into the world with them in collaboration. It was such a phenomenally collaborative process. It was such partnership, such friendship, and a lot of trust. And the responsibility weighed very heavy on me and still does.
If you had to summarize the mission of Layers in like 1 to 2 sentences, what would that look like?
I say that the Layers Project seeks to tell stories about the challenges and triumphs of the lives of Jewish women. It seeks to explore the insights, the meaning making, the nuanced expressions of resilience, of struggle, and of growth. And it's here to connect us all in healing and to be a transformative agent in the community, to open dialogue about the things that we really need to talk about.
That was not your first time answering this question or knowing this type of mission. Your mission is so clear. You know, me, I'd be like,
for a while.
I need a minute. Like, I know, like, I'm here for this. This is the mission. This is what we're doing. Like, I can tell it to you straight. And I love that so much. If people want to hear more of you and the Layers Project, see more of you and the Layers Project, you know, how can they find you?
Sure. Well, you can check out our website, thelayers.projectmagazine.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Layers Project. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. I write a lot of stuff on my personal pages too. I'm very interesting, and I put a lot of book stuff there. Sheer Lincoln Sheps. That's where you can find me and all of us.
Where can people purchase the book? Because I highly recommend it.
Yeah, so you can purchase the book on korenpub.com. They have an American site, like an English site and an Israeli site. You should use the code LAYERS15 for 15% off your order. The book is available now in America and in Canada and in Israel and in the UK. It'll be available in just a few short weeks, but you can order it today. You can pre-order it if it's not at your location yet. And you also can get it in bookstores. Believe it or not, there are some bookstores that are carrying this book.
Wow.
With the faces of gorgeous women right on the cover. Some Judaica stores. I've seen it. I've seen proof.
That's incredible. I mean, I think you're doing God's work. I will put the link to purchase the book as well as the code in the show notes. And I'm just honored to have you on as someone who is just the model of how to do this right. You know, I'm still kind of figuring this out.
We all are, honey. Trust me, we all are. I screw up all the time, but you know, it's important work, and what you're doing is so important. And you're one of my favorite people on the internet. I love following you.
Oh, thanks. We can end the episode on that. Thanks for joining, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Woman of Valor podcast. Make sure to subscribe at thewovlife.com as well as on your favorite podcast listening app. Follow us on Instagram at Woman of Valor Podcast.